can relook at it. Yes, Joanna. So you are having an exam. It's not this week, um, and it's not even really next week. I think I have it open like in a few Mondays, but I wanted to review with you all in parts just because it's like a lot of content. I didn't want to just give you everything in one take. So we'll break it up. This will be part one, and then next week we'll do part two. So this week will be phylogeny, classification, and viruses. And then next week we can do the prokaryotes and the protists. So is Thursday an okay day? I meet with my other class Wednesdays, and I mean my other day that I'm available is Friday, but I also don't want to do that to you all. That I have you here at 5:30 on a Friday. So hopefully Thursday is okay. But if you all want Friday, we can do Friday as well. I just didn't know. I didn't want to have because I had reviewed with you all one time on a Friday and I felt really bad. So let's see. Hopefully Thursdays is okay. And I've only got about 20 slides. And we're going to also talk about viruses, which is pretty good. That's definitely a current issue. So hopefully that kind of brings a little bit more awareness. And you can also chime in. So as far as classification, this system is used only for living things. So anything that is living has to go through this classification system. The largest, I guess, realm would be the domain. So in biology, there's 3 types of domains that everything falls under, and then it goes to the most specific part, which is a species. So like, I don't know. Well, actually, you know what? I had included a picture. So let's kind of show you the picture. So here's a really good picture that kind of shows you how it's really broad. You see the domain, how there's a lot of organisms in that picture, and then it narrows down until you get one singular species. And so it might be kind of hard to see because the names are really small, but if you look at domain, can you type in the chat, what does it say under domain? What is the name of that specific domain? Type it in the chat if you can see it. It's really small. It starts with an E. So if you can see it, if you could type it in, please. Okay, so eukarya. So what eukarya is any living thing that is a eukaryote. And I know you all know about eukaryotes versus prokaryotes. So anything that is a eukaryote is considered to be in the eukarya domain. The other 2 domains are bacteria and then archaea. So those are the only 3 domains for all living things, and then it just keeps getting more specific, more specific, more specific. So if you notice, you can look kind of down the chain and you can see how the squirrel is in all of them. It's in the same domain as all these other organisms, and then it's in the same domain as even the jellyfish. Let's talk about the fox. This is kind of so for a fox, do you all think a fox is more closely related to a cat, or do you think it's more closely related to a dog? What do y'all think? A fox. Is it closer to the cat or closer to the dog? Yeah, but most people say dog, but it's actually closer to the cat, which is kind of weird. You wouldn't think that. But if you were to look at their phylogeny or the DNA comparisons, they are closer to a cat. So they have a very similar like digestive system to a cat. Cats are purely, how would you put it, carnivorous. They only eat meat. If you gave a cat a vegetarian or vegan diet, that cat would die, unfortunately. But for a dog has a much longer intestinal system, and so those that you can feed them actually like a vegetarian or vegan diet, and they would be okay. But if you did that to a cat, you couldn't. So for foxes, they have a similar diet to a cat, so they are closer to the cat, although they look like I would say that, yeah, they look kind of like a dog. So that's kind of just an interesting little fact for you guys. But so this is the classification system. This is kind of how we classify all living organisms. And then we also have these, which we call phylogenetic trees. Sometimes you'll see the word cladogram. And so this just kind of shows the relationships between animals. So you can kind of see how the giraffe and the bat are closer together in DNA versus a giraffe and a hawk, right? That's just kind of how it is. And now that we're looking at this, how can I phrase this? Well, okay. So I think we have talked about it before, for birds, maybe we haven't, but birds have very unique characteristics that are really similar to reptiles. So can you think of any similarities between birds and reptiles? You can type them in the chat or you can unmute yourself. Can you think of any similarities between birds and reptiles? Anything else? You can keep typing, Tell me. Similarities between birds and reptiles, like a bird and a lizard. What similarities do they have? Anything else? Okay, so the eggs is a really good one. They both lay eggs. Claws, yeah, they both have claws. Have you noticed the way that the feet look on a bird? Have you ever looked at like a chicken's foot? What does it look, or what does it have on it? What does a chicken's foot have? You can put it in the chat. It does have webbing, but what else? What else do you see on a chicken foot? What else? What? I don't know. Do they have spurs? I guess if it's a boy, I don't know if girls have spurs. But what else? Like, how does it look? No, something else. Something else about the feet. What else? Yeah, there we go. Scales. They have scales. If you look at a chicken's foot or a bird's foot, they have scales, just like a reptile. So what their feathers are actually modified scales, which is pretty cool. Dinosaurs, not all of them, but a lot of them did have feathers, like the Velociraptor, which is not the way. Actually, okay, so this is incorrect now that I'm looking at it. So the Velociraptor in the textbook picture is not correct. Like the real one, if you were to Google it, which I guess we could, if you were to Google like a real Velociraptor, there we go. They're very short and they have feathers. Like they don't look like the ones like in Jurassic Park or whatever. Let's see. Let me see if I can share my screen and we can look at a real one, right? A real Velociraptor. I don't know why that's very hard for me to say. So you should be able to see my screen. Let's go to Velociraptor. Okay, yeah, just double checking that you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, so these are like all the Jurassic Park ones. Let's look for like the real one. Should I Google like real Velociraptor? Lord, let's see. Well, I guess he kind of looks like the one, that first one, right? Real. There you go. I mean, obviously we don't have like a real picture, right? Because, I mean, they're dead. But they looked more similar to this. Like they were short and they had feathers. So it's kind of a fun fact. Did you all know that? Let me stop sharing. Tell me, did you all know that? Let me know. Okay, now I lost what I was doing. Where is my files? That's okay, Angel, as long as you made it. So, okay, so yeah, that's our Velociraptor. But yeah, this is the phylogenetic tree. All that these do is they show relationships, how closely or farther away organisms are based on their DNA. And these can change. So these can change if we find a new fossil, or if we're able to sequence DNA that we couldn't sequence before. So this is not like a concrete thing. If we ever find a new fossil, it'll change our phylogenetic trees, which it happens, I wouldn't say like often, but it does happen, which is pretty cool. Okay, and then going on to the next chapter. So as far as the last chapter, I really just kind of needed you to understand relationships as far as the phylogenetic trees, and then the classification system. And you know what? Let me go back because there is a mnemonic for that. It's King Philip came over for good soup. Let me put that in the chat. But then there's the D. So some people were saying Dr. King. Dr. King Philip came over for good soup. So that's a good mnemonic is what we call it. A good mnemonic for you to memorize these, right? Doctor for domain, K for kingdom, P for phylum. We don't use the subphylum one, so you can kind of disregard that one. Came for class, over for order, for family. You all understand what I'm saying. So I put that in the chat. It's a really good mnemonic for you all to remember. The names and the definitions. So you should know you should know these. Domain, kingdom, yeah, you should know them. Mm-hmm. Like there's going to be in future chapters where we only talk about a specific phylum. So like in this picture, this phylum is called Chordata, which is any animal that has a chordate, or also known as a spinal cord. And so we'll specify just on certain phylums. So like knowing these words, yeah, I would say yes, that you should know them. Which I think you are familiar with them. Maybe a few of them are new, but for the most part, like I think you all know like kingdom, class, order, family. So just remembering them in order is super important. Remembering the one that is most specific is the species. The one that is least specific is the domain. And then you should be okay. So, okay. When Earth started, I wanted to insert a picture, but I couldn't really find a good one. When like life started on Earth, what do you think it looked like? How did the Earth look before there was all these like pretty coral reefs and trees? Like, how did the Earth look? What do you all think? Before life started, how did the Earth look?
Well, the chapter said that it was fluctuating between ice and fire.
Yeah, in some cartoons, and I can't think of what, like they have scenes where there's like lightning everywhere and all that. That's true. So also another thing that was really different was that there was no oxygen. So because there was no oxygen, obviously we couldn't really have anything living. So it was kind of like, well, then how did life start? And so there is this really popular experiment that we'll talk about in a second. But as far as early Earth, there was an absence of oxygen, but you had a lot of CO2 or carbon dioxide. You also had other gases like methane. But so, really, what I need for you to remember is that before there was life, there was little to no oxygen present. So, it wasn't until we had oxygen that we could have other life forms. So, let's kind of go over that a little bit. Let's see. So, this is what we call the Miller-Urey experiment. It's these two scientists that tried to mimic an experiment that would, I guess, mimic how early Earth was. And so that's why they have the ocean, that it was hot, and then they had a electricity. Where is it? On the top right, you can see they had electricity, which is to mimic the lightning. And then from that, they were just creating an atmosphere and seeing what was, I guess, what could be created. And so they did not create life, but they were able to create the building blocks of life, which you can see on the bottom. It says small organic molecules, which are amino acids. So amino acids are the building blocks to proteins. So that was the outcome of their experiment. So all that you need to know from Miller-Urey is that they created an experiment to mimic the way early Earth looked, and they created not life, but they created amino acids. And that, okay, well, we went over that. We talked about the methane, so that there was a lot of methane present. The adenine here, adenine is what we would say, adenine is part of DNA. Remember the A, T, G, and C? So that's where you hear adenine. So, what do you think was the first type of organism? You can type it in the chat. First type of living organism on Earth. What was it? What do y'all think? Mm-hmm. Okay, very good. So that you're thinking of small scale, that's correct. So it was bacteria. And so this bacteria was a bacteria that was able to survive in a place where there wasn't any oxygen. So let me put it in the chat. And we've gone over this word before, I believe in last semester. So cyanobacteria is the bacteria that pretty much gave rise to oxygen or created an oxygen-rich environment on the planet. So cyanobacteria is a photosynthetic type of bacteria, and it's a very old, very ancient, and that's the bacteria that we know to give rise to oxygen. And so if it wasn't for that bacteria, like, we wouldn't have anything. We wouldn't have plants or anything of that sort if we didn't have that bacteria. So very, very cool. I think on here, I think we went over that as well. Well, I think around 3.8 billion years ago is when the ocean temperature dropped to 49 degrees, to 49 to 88 degrees Celsius. First organisms emerged around this time. And another thing also is, like, where did they originate? Do you all know that? Where did bacteria originate? Like, on what part of the planet? What part of the planet did bacteria originate? Okay, so the ocean is correct. Now let's see, do you know what part of the ocean? Because the ocean is huge. So, like, what kind of ocean environment do you think? Okay, well, let's try again, Justin. It's not shallow, but where else? What do you all think? Yeah, so see if I can find a picture. Yeah, let's see. I'm gonna try and find y'all a picture. Yeah, so we call them thermal vents. And so what thermal vents are is they're kind of like, I don't know, I wouldn't say a volcano, but like a really hot hole in the earth. I mean, that sounds like a volcano. Let's see. Thermal vent ocean. Can you all see that? Yeah, you can. Okay. So, I mean, this is what they look like. I can't really find a good one, but yeah. So not necessarily like a volcano, but it's a hole and hot gas comes out of the earth from there. But so it was in these areas that we had our first types of bacteria to come to life or be created, which is kind of cool. How you can get all of this life from a single little bacteria. So it's pretty cool. There we go. Okay. How are y'all doing? You're doing okay? I'm like halfway done. You're good? Okay. Okay, cool. So continuing with cells, the exam, Valeria, is the end of next week. So not this week. It'll be the end of next week. So what we're doing is reviewing half of the content now, and then next week we'll review the second half so that you don't have like a long review. We're just kind of breaking it up so that you can, I guess it could be a little bit easier, and then you all can rewatch these when you have a few minutes. But so for this slide, endosymbiosis, So all that this is saying is when you had kind of like the primitive eukaryotic cells. So the eukaryotic cells are the ones that they have the nucleus, the Golgi apparatus. They're bigger cells. They're more sophisticated or more advanced. They, I guess, engulfed another cell, which is the mitochondria. The mitochondria used to be its own cell. Same with the chloroplast. It used to be its own cell, and then the eukaryotic cell engulfed it, and now it lives there forever. And so, like, the reason, like, or the justification how we know is because the mitochondria has, and the chloroplast, they have their own DNA, they have their own membrane, um, and they're able to metabolize on their own. So they can make ATP on their own. They don't need any other part of the cell to do that. So that's how we know that those two cells were engulfed by the eukaryotic cell and live there permanently. So that's kind of cool. But so yeah, this is called the endosymbiotic theory. Endosymbiotic theory. Let me put that in the chat. Endosymbiotic theory, that the eukaryotic cell engulfed the mitochondria and the chloroplast, and now they live there permanently. So, okay. Let's see. Can anybody tell me what is wrong with this, the bottom part of the picture? There's something very wrong with it, and I don't know why they still have it in this textbook, but can anybody tell me there's something very wrong with that last part of the picture? Let's see if anybody can figure it out. No, not two mitochondria. You can have multiple mitochondria. And so also muscle cells would be the ones in your body that have the most mitochondria. So it's kind of interesting. But no, it's not the mitochondria. Anybody else want to take a shot at it? What else is wrong with that last picture? It's something with the chloroplasts, right? Well, there it's labeled cyanobacteria, which is the chloroplast. What's wrong with those chloroplasts? Anybody? Take a guess. Take a guess. Do chloroplasts belong in animal cells? Is that an animal cell? Yes or no? What do y'all think? Yeah, that's an animal cell, right? And I don't see a cell wall. It's got a round shape. It's not a square rectangle, so that's an animal cell. So in that picture, you shouldn't have any chloroplasts. So I don't know why they have it like that, but yeah. I wasn't sure if anybody else caught that, but okay. So let's move on. So this will be the last chapter that we cover, which is viruses. And then next week we'll do prokaryotes and protists. So for viruses, some of the unique things about them, well, I guess we'll start with how small they are. They're extremely, extremely, extremely small. On the picture, the big green thing is a eukaryotic cell. So that would be a cell with a nucleus, right? Compared to how small a virus is, they're tiny, which is why they can go undetected, and also how they can, mostly be undetected. So when we are dealing with the virus that we're dealing with now, some of the unique things about viruses is that they can, I don't want to say live because they don't live, but they can be active for a long time. Like if you have them on a surface, they can be active for days, weeks. I mean, it's a long time. So that's why they want you to constantly disinfect. The virus that we're dealing with now is it could be transmitted in the air. It's actually pretty scary. But some of the unique things about viruses is that, let's go back, they're not living. So can you type in the chat or tell me, how do we know that viruses are not living? Like what characteristics say that viruses are not living? So that's true that they need to attach to a host. Um, so no, they don't have a nucleus. They don't. They do have DNA, but they don't have a nucleus. But other cells don't have a nucleus, and they're still considered to be living. So, what the difference between a virus and a cell, which is living, is that a virus does not metabolize. When we say metabolize, meaning that it needs to make ATP. So, viruses don't metabolize, therefore, we don't classify them as living. And so, when they're not being used, you can't even really say that you killed a virus because you can't kill something that isn't alive. We use the words like active and inactive. So if you've ever heard that, I'm not sure, but yeah. So viruses, you can't kill a virus. If they're inside of your body too, which is kind of scary, they can sometimes just not be. They won't be killed, but they'll just be like inactive, and they're super specific. So I'll put that in the chat. That viruses are very specific. So what that means is that they can only attack certain types of cells, and that's why certain viruses can only affect certain organisms. So there could be a virus just for plants, or a virus just for fungi, or a virus like COVID-19, which affects the respiratory part of, I think it's mammals only. At this point, I'm not so sure though. I mean, it might change. But yeah, so the COVID 19 virus is something that affects the respiratory cells. It won't affect other cells in your body, right? Only a specific type of cell. And that's because the mechanism, and I don't think I have a picture. Let me go through some cell, kind of. So here's a good kind of a picture. So these are just different shapes of cells, but they have different mechanisms that they can use to attach to a cell. And so it's kind of like a lock and key. If it's not able to adhere to a host cell on the plasma membrane, then it can't be active. And so does anybody know what a virus does? Like, what does it do? Once it attaches to a host cell, what does a virus do? Like, it's not living, so then what do you think it's doing? Yeah, okay. Okay, good. So yeah, it's what it does is it transfers, there we go, transfers its DNA or RNA, could be RNA or DNA, like the COVID-19 one is RNA. So it could be transferring its DNA or its RNA to the host cell. And so the host cell, they say like that the cell is hijacked, which is kind of true. So a cell has DNA instructions inside of it, and all that it's doing is reading the DNA, because all that DNA is instructions. So it's just reading the instructions and making things. Making a mitochondria, making a chloroplast, making whatever it is, it's making something. But when a virus attaches to that cell, the cell stops doing what it's supposed to do, and it starts getting the recipe to make a new virus. That's really what it is. So it injects its DNA into the host cell, and then the host cell has this viral DNA, and it makes more viruses. So it could be that. It could be that it makes more viruses. It could be that it just shuts down and kills the cell. So there's different types. It's scary. Yeah, it is kind of scary. And so, okay, well, this is, I think, the scarier part for like the COVID-19 one, is that the longer that a virus is out there, it's susceptible to something. What do you all think? The longer that the virus is out there, what is the virus able to do? What do y'all think?
Oh, there's variations now.
Yeah. Okay. So what it can do is there can be a mutation. So mutations are not intentional. Like, it's not like I don't know. It's not intentional. It's a mistake. What a mutation is? It's a mistake, and so that can lead to what we call like a new strain. So that's why it's super important when we say to quarantine. We mean it so that the virus is contained and that we can eradicate it as best as we can, because if we let the virus go for a long time just unattended, that virus now has time to have a mutation and mutate into something even more dangerous. And so that's kind of how viruses work. If you let it go and leave it out there, it has the opportunity to change, create a new strain. And I think that's happening already with COVID-19. There's like different strains. There's like, I think they said there's one from the UK, and then there's one now from I don't know where. So now there's like different strains. And so the vaccine that is out now will help you only for like the original virus, but not the new virus strain. So that's kind of how that works. That's why we should have quarantine to contain the virus so that it didn't have the opportunity to do what it's doing now. And so that's kind of how serious it is. Do you all have any comments or other insight, maybe that I forgot something that you can kind of shed light on as far as anything about COVID-19 or viruses? No? Okay, let me go back because I had missed a few slides. Let me see, what was I supposed to talk about? The structure. Okay, yeah, that's true too. Okay, so we talked about kind of how viruses look. Another thing that is really unique about them, we said that they don't metabolize. And the way that we know they don't metabolize is because they don't have cytoplasm. And so cytoplasm, most of us just think, oh, it's just the jelly. It's just the jelly that's in between the nucleus and all of that. Yeah, I mean, it is, but also that's where glycolysis happens, which is part of cellular respiration. So glycolysis does produce energy. And so, or it's part of metabolism, it produces energy. So viruses don't have a cytoplasm. And so that's how we know that they don't metabolize. It's very strange. Like, it's like, how is this thing even, like, how is it even real? Like, there's assumptions that maybe they came from like a meteorite from another planet. Like, if you were to Google, like, where did viruses come from? That nobody knows. Like, we don't know in science yet because it's so strange. Like, how is this thing not alive, but it's like killing things and like able to spread its DNA? Very strange. So that would kind of be a cool topic to research. Like, where did viruses come from? But yeah, one of the biggest things is that they don't metabolize, and we know that because they don't have a cytoplasm. As far as their genetic makeup, they can have DNA or RNA. Like we said, the COVID-19 one is a RNA virus. It can be either circular, meaning like round, or linear, like a line. Single or double stranded because it's DNA or RNA. And I think that's really mostly all that I wanted to touch on for that slide. Another thing about the structure is that some viruses, they all have a capsid, which is kind of like a coat, but they also can have a gelatinous sheath, which is just kind of like this gel, and they have that because it allows for them to go undetected throughout the body. So like a virus can be in an animal or a human and just be inactive and like dormant, and then when the time comes, it like just attacks. The viruses are very they're nothing to be messed with. So make sure that you are taking precautions because they're pretty intense. As far as host, what else can we say about them? So we had mentioned that there's different types. So there are some viruses that they kind of go for the long haul. Like, they're just quietly in your body, and they might show up every now and then. And a really common example is the herpes, but the one that's on the lip, the cold sore. I'm sure a lot of you have seen the herpes. I think it's herpes 2. Maybe it's herpes 1. I don't know. So there's the genital herpes, and then there's the one on the lip. So like that one, the cold sore one, that one isn't always visible. Like, it's only visible like if it's cold or if you get really sick. So there's viruses like that they're just in your body and they kind of show up every now and then. But then there's other viruses that as soon as they get in you, like they just, the purpose is to kill the organism. So there's different types and severities of viruses. So just kind of know that. So hopefully viruses are a little bit interesting with you all. We already talked about how they replicate. They attach to a cell, they inject their DNA or RNA, and then the cell just makes copies and copies and copies. And that's kind of just how it works. Here are some pandemics. This is, I guess, from maybe last year because they don't have the COVID one. So the Spanish flu from 1918 killed 50 to 100 million worldwide, which is a lot. The Asian flu killed over 100,000 Americans, and the Hong Kong flu, which was I guess the earliest, or I'm not earliest, sorry, but the most recent, 1968, was 50 million. I'm not sure what the numbers are for COVID-19. I know for US we have over 300,000 deaths. What different viruses fight each other for the same host. So like we said, like viruses are super specific, so they only attack certain parts or certain specific cells. Like COVID-19 targets the lungs, so they would probably target different parts of the body. But yeah, you can definitely have different viruses within one body, because like another common one is like HIV, right? HIV is a immune one. It affects your immune system, HIV. So this slide is the last slide, and so I just wanted to kind of put it there just to kind of show you how it can get transmitted between different types of organisms. So like I think some people were, I don't remember, where did they say that the COVID-19 one came from? Like some people were saying it was a bat, and then some other people were saying different things. Let me see if I can, did they say it was a bat? Does anybody know? You could put it in the chat. Let's see. I feel like I heard it was a bat. I'm gonna say, but then I also heard like pangolin. So I'm not so sure. Yeah, I don't know. I can't really find it. Maybe it was a bat. And then that people were saying, I guess that they ate the bat or something. Yeah, I had heard that too. Like it was in the black market. Obviously, like we don't know. Like it could have been something else. Like I had heard that too, that it was like eating bat soup in kind of like a really low income type of market where there was like a lot of contamination, like cross contamination. I'm not so sure. Like that's, I don't know. But so yeah, I mean that can happen. So you can have viruses from different species crossing, and especially because a bat is a mammal. If it affects a bat, then yeah, it definitely could affect us. Just like it could affect a dog, it could affect a mouse. So and I think they have already said that it's like some people have tested their dog and that their dog tested positive for COVID-19. So, but yeah, so that was the review for the first half of your test, and then next week we can meet again and we'll do prokaryotes and the protists. The protists I think are a little bit confusing if you haven't. I think just because there's a lot of them, so hopefully next week when you all show up, it'll kind of clarify it a little bit. But do you all have questions so far as the viruses or anything else that we talked about? No. Yeah, well, I'm hoping that I can get the vaccine. I don't qualify for the vaccines, but I'm hoping to get it. Question about the exam? Sure, go ahead. So it'll be posted. So actually, let me see the timeline. I had it here. Right, so this is your timeline. So right now we're in week 3, and then next week is week 4. And then if you look at week 5 in the middle, exam 1 is it's like it's at the top. So what I might do is just open it the following weekend and have it open for like a week. Just because I don't want it to overlap with the other stuff that you're doing. But so, yeah, it will not be at the beginning of the week. Maybe I'll post it at the end of the week. Well, let's see. Do you have a lot going on next week? We'll see. Yeah, so it's either going to be at the end of next week or the beginning of the following week. But if you notice, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chapters, and so that's why I wanted to review with you in 2 parts. So you have to remember. No, you don't have to work. No, don't worry about that. You don't have to memorize the different periods. But so yeah. Also next week you'll get your second Flipgrid discussion, and then also you'll get your research assignment topics. I had you all enroll yourselves into groups, so if you could just double check that you are in a group, because if not, then I have to like assign people, and I don't want to do that. So just choose your group, find people that you want to work with, so I don't have to assign, and then I'll post the topics, and then you guys choose your topic, and then we'll go from there as well. Do you have any other questions for me right now? Chapter 25 is closed. For SmartBook, yeah, it is closed. Okay, so then if you all are good, then you can go ahead and take off. If you still have questions, you can stay, and then we can talk. Let me just stop recording. So thank you all for coming. It's nice to see you all. I hope you're doing okay, and then we'll meet again next Thursday, and we'll do this again for the second half. Okay, bye guys.